Friends, today we have a slightly unusual episode. Usually we talk about ancient peoples, civilizations, and rulers. Everything is as usual, but this time we decided to take a break from chronicles and debunk a popular historical myth. The reason was the comments under our videos about the Mongol Empire, where from time to time people claim that it's all a lie. In reality, there was the Great Tartary, a giant civilization stretching from the North Pole to Rome. Admit it, it sounds like a budget version of Atlantis, only with yurts, kumis, and mysterious ancient buildings. Supporters of this theory are convinced that Tartary was erased from history, but they forgot to destroy the maps, and it is these old maps that they refer to as their main evidence. Today we'll figure out where this mysterious Tartary came from and why it looks more like fantasy than real history. And at the same time, how an ordinary geographical label gave birth to an entire conspiracy theory. Hello friends, you're on the Amazing History channel, where we explore history without myths. Thank you for watching us, and special thanks to our sponsors who help these videos come out. If you want to support independent historical content, become a sponsor on YouTube. We have behind-the-scenes content planned, early access, and the opportunity to influence topic selection. Now get ready with your critical thinking, and let's go debunk some myths. So, what is Great Tartaria according to its followers? If you believe this theory, then basically all of Eurasia was once part of a single huge superpower. From the North Pole to the Great Wall of China, from Scandinavia to Persia, all of this was supposedly Tartaria. Sometimes they even add America. Well, why not go all out? This state was imagined as almost a utopia. All peoples lived in peace and harmony. The technology was more advanced than today. The architecture was grand, with columns, domes, and classical facades, and it was ruled either by Mongols or Slavs or white-skinned titans 3 meters tall. Here, as they say, it's a matter of taste. According to the myth, the end of Tartaria was sudden and dramatic. It was supposedly destroyed either by cunning Western empires, especially the British, or by secret societies, usually with European surnames, or even by a global mud catastrophe that covered everything civilized with a thick layer of silt. What you choose depends on the YouTube channel you're watching. However, what these versions have in common is that all official history is a lie, while these pictures with maps from old atlases are the truth that they are hiding from us. Now let's figure out what Tartaria actually was, not in myths, but in reality. In fact, there never was any Tartaria as a unified state. It was simply a convenient word that Europeans used to refer to all those mysterious lands in the east where some bearded horsemen roamed. Well, accuracy was a secondary matter. The word came from Tatars, which was how various nomadic peoples were called, mostly Turks and Mongols. When in the 13th century the Mongols began to actively visit Europe with their polite and devastating visits, they were collectively called Tatars, even though the Mongols themselves didn't really call themselves that. On the contrary, they soon started correcting people, actually, we're Mongols. But the Europeans insisted. If you're from the east and on horseback, then you're a Tatar. The word Tartary appeared thanks to European cartographers who didn't want to bother with the details of who lived where or who was fighting whom. It was easier to call everything by one name. So, on maps, the vast territory from the Caspian Sea to the Pacific Ocean began to be labeled as Tartary. And the reference to Tartarus from Greek mythology, the underworld where sinners are tormented, added a sense of mystery and anxiety. Well, it's convenient because it's very similar to how Europeans called the inhabitants of America Indians, since they thought they had arrived in India and the name just stuck. So with Tartary, there was no geopolitics involved, just cartographic laziness and confidence. You know who I'm talking about, right? Now let's move on to the most rock-solid argument of the supporters of Tartary. Look at the old maps, they say. It's written in black and white. Tartary. That means there was such a country. And it's true. Maps from the 16th to 19th centuries are full of references to Tartary. It's pleasing to the eye and fires up the imagination, but there's a catch. In reality, European cartographers of that time didn't draw political maps based on asking the locals who ruled there. Most often, these were rather loose fantasies along the lines of, well, it looks like there's a steppe over there. Let's label it as Tartary and go have some wine. They didn't really know the actual political situation, and it was too far, too dangerous, and honestly, they were just too lazy to find out. Moreover, half of these maps were created recently not for navigation, but for decoration, to hang on the wall and impress guests. A similar story happened with other regions. The Spaniards drew America as their territory long before they even got there. Africa was divided with a ruler, ignoring the local peoples, and India could be anywhere, even in Siberia. So, if a 1770 map says Tartary, it doesn't mean there was a single superethnos with anti-gravity there. It just means the cartographer didn't bother. He called the entire East by a familiar word. The irony is, if the enemies of Tartary really wanted to erase it from history, it would make sense to start with the maps. And since the maps remained while everything else mysteriously disappeared, well, maybe the enemies were either very careless, or the maps were outside the reach of the conspiracy. To see how far the myth of Tartary is from reality, it's enough to just open textbooks or at least chronicles, archives and annals. Fortunately, there are plenty of them. Central East Asia, after the collapse of the Mongol Empire, is not a blank spot that needs to be urgently filled with a fantastical Tartary. On the contrary, this is a region with a rich history and many states that you know about from a variety of sources. And thanks to the episodes on our channel, Chinese, Persian, Turkic, Slavic, Armenian, Arab, Indian, and other sources, the list goes on. We know about the Golden Horde, the Chagatai Ulus, the Timurids, the Uzbeks, the Kazakh Khanate, the Mughals in India, the Ming and Qin dynasties in China, the Dzungars, and the Oirats. Thousands of documents, chronicles, letters, journeys, treaties, and even poetic works. They tell us there was no Tartary there, so what do we have from Tartary? Just a few maps with a general name and a sea of speculation. And here's a simple question. Where is the memory of this great empire? Where is the folklore? Where are the epics? Where are the heroes? Where are the tragedies? Where are the Bailinas? And in the end, where is even a single archaeological find with the inscription Empire of Tartary? Not a single people of Central Asia in any tradition or any epic has any memory of a shared Tartar past. Moreover, the peoples themselves know their real history perfectly well and do not need any mythical constructs. For example, try telling an Uzbek about Bukhara Tartary, and he will most likely tell you about Shaybani Khan and the Timurids, not about ancient columns and lost technologies. The Mongols have the secret history of the Mongols, the Kazakhs have the Zheti Zhargi, the Uyghurs have a rich written tradition, and the Tajiks have the heritage of Persian literature and chronicles from the Shahnameh to the works of Al-Biruni and Ibn Sina. Not a word about Tartary. And this is despite the fact that for these peoples, historical memory plays a huge role in national identity. So, if there had been some lost superpower, its traces would be found in the culture. But there are absolutely none, neither in oral, nor in written, nor in architectural tradition. Tartaria is not a forgotten history, it's a history that simply never existed. Now let's move on to why this myth is so popular today. If Tartaria never existed, then why do so many people believe in it? And not just believe, but argue about it so passionately. On the internet, people refer to maps, post evidence on TikTok, and even come up with theories about ancient power plants hidden in cathedrals. There are several reasons for this popularity, and they're all quite human. First of all, it's the longing for lost glory in a world where history is often presented as a series of colonizations, defeats, and destructions. We really want to believe that we were once great, that our ancestors had not just wagons and sabers, but ancient palaces and advanced technologies that were later stolen. It gives a sense of pride and inner dignity, even if all of it is made up. Secondly, a simple explanation for a complex world. The history of Asia after the Mongols is a complicated mosaic of peoples, khanates, wars, alliances, dynasties, and religions. We talk about all of this constantly on our channel. However, it's much easier to imagine one big empire where everyone lived in harmony than to try to understand the Timurids, the Dzungars, the Qing, and other dynasties. A myth gives a clear and simple picture. Things were good, then villains came, and things got bad. Convenient, right? Thirdly, there's a tendency toward conspiracy theories. Many people, especially in the age of social media, feel the need to see themselves as insiders. They don't just listen to the official version, they've uncovered the truth that's being hidden. It gives them a sense of control and exclusivity. I know something that others don't. After all, as one commentator said, divide and conquer is their method, so the truth must be somewhere nearby on the old map. Fourth, the internet and algorithms. Today, if you watch a video about the mysterious buildings of Tartary just once, YouTube will decide you're a true fan and start suggesting everything to you. From mud floods to giants who built St. Petersburg, in a couple of weeks you won't even notice how you become an expert in ancient architecture in Omsk. And finally, it's just interesting. The myth of Tartary is a beautiful, captivating tale. The atmosphere of mystery surrounding vanished civilizations, ancient technologies, and a global conspiracy is truly gripping. And here it's important not to ridicule people's beliefs, but to offer them an alternative. The real history of the East is no less fascinating. It's just without illusions. So, let's sum it up. Great Tartary is not a forgotten empire, but a forgotten habit of Europeans to call everything beyond their understanding by a single word. On old maps, Tartary is not a state, but a vast zone of uncertainty with nomads, camels, and the steppe wind. There are no historical sources confirming the existence of a unified Tatar superpower, not in chronicles, not in archaeology, and not in folklore. But the real history of the peoples of Eurasia is complex and dramatic, full of true empires, wars, cultures, rises and falls. It exists, and it's no less impressive than any alternative theories. There are simply fewer giants in it, but more facts. So, if you come across another post on the internet about Tartary being hidden, now you have arguments and can confidently send them this video. And most importantly, remember that critical thinking, like history, is not always easy, but it's always useful. Thank you for watching until the end. If you like this format, give it a like, share the video, and of course, don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next episodes. I promise next time you'll get real history again with no magical mud floods for now.